So welcome to this session of the class of 21. Today we're going to be looking at virtual interviews, in particular video interviews. So hopefully by the end of this session, you're going to think about how to find out what to expect from video interviews and how they're used by employers. You're going to understand a bit about how to prepare for virtual video interviews, both preparing yourself and the technology that you're going to be using. And you're going to discover ways to practice video interviews, which is really a key part of preparing for the recruitment process. And I'm going to also tell you where you can get further support from the Careers and Employability Service as well. Okay, so before we start, I just wanted to open the floor really to get some ideas from you. So has anyone ever had a video interview before? What advice would you give to others who are about to attend a virtual interview? And if you have any specific questions or queries, please drop them in the chat box and I'll address those as we go along. So feel free to use the chat box or unmute yourselves. I just thought we'd have a little sort of small discussion to begin with. If anyone's had a virtual video interview already, what was your experience of it? Could you offer any tips for anyone? What would be your one top tip for anyone who's about to go for a video interview? Just give you a couple of minutes to have a think about that. If you don't want to unmute yourselves, absolutely fine. Just drop your answers in the chat box. Or also if you have any particular concerns or queries, then drop those in as well. Okay, yeah, Jennifer, no problem. I can email you the slides afterwards, no problem. Okay, all right. So no questions or queries so far. All right, so perhaps there'll be more as we go along. No problem at all. So when it comes to video interviews, there's kind of two types that you might expect. The first type might be a live interview where you'll actually be interviewed by people on the other side of the camera. It'll be in real time and it will be kind of equivalent to an in-person face-to-face interview. And these are becoming, a lot more popular these days, particularly since the onset of the pandemic. But also it's kind of been beneficial in many ways because it means less travel time for people, and it's more efficient use of employers' time as well. So employers have started using video interviews as part of the recruitment process for quite a long time. But obviously this year and the last 18 months has seen a massive increase in those as well. So they've become a really prominent part of the recruitment process. And sorry, I'm just writing something down there from the chat box. Okay, and particularly in response to social distancing measures, as you can imagine. They can form part of a virtual assessment centre, which forms a regular part of the recruitment process, or they could be a standalone interview that comes, near the final stages of the selection process. So you may be interviewed by a single person on the other side of the camera, or you might have a panel of people who are asking you questions. So in these instances, you would prepare for them as you would a face-to-face interview. And we've got lots of resources on that on our careers platform, Your Career Journey, which I'll tell you about later on in the session. But in these cases, it's really important that you become familiar with the technology that they're asking you to use. And they will give you, or they should give you, some tips on how to prepare and at least tell you the platform that you'll be using. They may send you a Zoom invitation or a Microsoft Teams invitation. They might tell you that they're going to call you on Skype. So it's important that you're familiar on how to use these technologies and that you're confident in using them as well. So later on in the session, I'm going to give you some links to tutorials for various technologies like Microsoft Teams and Zoom as well. Because lots of people find them quite tricky to use when they've not used them before. And the last thing you want is to be worrying about the technology when you're trying to concentrate on giving really good, strong answers in the interview situation. So the best advice I can give there is to really become familiar with the technology you've been asked to use. So the other type of video interview is actually a kind of recorded video interview. It usually happens very early in the recruitment process after psychometric tests have been done, for example. And they form part of the recruiter's filtering system. And it actually involves you taking part in an interview where you'll see yourself on screen and you'll see automated questions come up on the screen, which you're then giving answers to under timed conditions. So they can feel very peculiar and unnerving to begin with. So again, we would always recommend you become familiar with the technology and that you practice being in this sort of situation. So the screen will be reversed. You'll see your face on the screen and you'll see automated questions come up. You'll have a few seconds to prepare your answer, and then you click record and you record your answer to the question. So it's a very different scenario to talking to someone else face to face when it feels like you're talking to yourself. They do take a lot of practice. It's worth practicing in the mirror as well, and watching how you use your body language and how you come across positively and confidently and in an approachable, friendly manner when you're on camera. So the recording will record your answers and you'll have a specific time limit for each one. We're going to talk more about this a bit later on in the session. So you'll be actually talking to a computer screen, as I said, rather than an actual person on the other side. Very often, the employer will give you a period of time when you need to complete that recording by. So they're not scheduled at a specific time. You can often complete them in your own time and then submit your answers before their deadline, which is good in many ways because you can factor in, who's going to be in your household and when you have some quiet time on your own and your own space to complete the interview in the right conditions. But they do feel very different to a face-to-face interview, and we'll talk more about these a bit later on. So preparation is really key to success, as we all know, but particularly in an interview situation. And the things you need to prepare are knowing yourself and what you can offer. So really taking a good overview of your CV, remembering all the highlights of your work experience or your volunteering or your skill set, and being able to articulate your strengths and your skills and qualities. So knowing yourself is really key. It might sound obvious, but lots of people struggle to really talk about themselves in a positive manner and to formulate succinct answers when they're asked interview questions. And again, we're going to look at that a bit later on. Then you have to show the employer that you know about them, because they will probably ask you questions such as, why have you applied for this organization? What is it about this company that appeals to you? Why do you want to work for us? So it's really important that you do your due diligence, that you research the company itself and the industry that they're in. And this is one of the key areas that employers often tell us that students don't do so well in. Because when they're asked what they know about the company, they're not able to offer much information. So go and research the company, find out what is unique about that company, what makes them really special, why do you want to work for them and not a competitor, and show that you've done your research and you have some commercial awareness. Really, really key. And then they're going to test what you know about the job role itself. And that means basically going through the job description thoroughly, again, using other websites like prospects.ac.uk, which is a really good website, to find out about the skills and the day-to-day duties and responsibilities of different job roles. Okay, so those are the three things to really consider when you're preparing for your interview. So in your preparation, it's really wise to go through thoroughly the job description and the person specification if you're provided with one. If you're not provided with a job description or a person specification, no harm in emailing the employer to ask for these things because they're really crucial in helping you prepare for that interview situation. It's basically the job description is going to tell you what they're expecting you to do in that role. And the person specification, which is the example I've got here, tells you the skills and the knowledge and the personal attributes that that employer is looking for. And if you don't know these things, then you're going to find it really hard to prepare for the interview, because you won't know what type of questions they're going to be probing for and what type of skill set and qualities they're going to be looking for in candidates. So as you can see here, the personal specification often has an essential criteria and a desirable criteria. You've got the two columns there. The essential criteria is obviously what they're really looking for, the things that really matter, such as an understanding of issues in public health and the personal attributes such as working as part of a team, a flexible approach to work, and ability to travel between sites. And then their desirable criteria is what they'd like candidates to have, but it's not essential. But if you can meet both sets of criteria, that's fantastic. So these things are telling you exactly what the employer is looking for. And these are things you need to bear in mind when you're preparing, because you can sort of preempt some of the questions or the type of questions you might be asked. And then you can start to think about preparing your answers. So thinking of examples based on this example, the person will probably think of examples when they've worked as a team, when they've showed flexibility, when they've shown experience of communicating information to others, and looking at large data sets and complex data sets. So you can imagine that these are things they're looking for. They've got a set criteria. They have to tick them off some way. So their interview questions will be in line with this set of skills and knowledge and attributes. So really crucial that you use the job description and personal specification to help you prepare. And it even tells you here how they assess for these things through the application form or the interview stages. Any questions so far? No? Okay. So as I said before, the employer's going to have a set criteria based on their job description and personal specification. And they basically have a check sheet to see which of those criteria you're ticking off. And they'll probably have a sort of scaler system to tick and to indicate how well you answered the questions and how strong your answers were. So they basically want to know whether you can do the job, whether you'll enjoy doing the job, that you understand who the company is, and whether you'll fit into their organization. So they're also looking for your personality and whether you're going to be approachable and be able to fit into their teams and work well with other people. So that's really why it's important to bring across, your friendly and approachable nature in a virtual interview, which can be difficult because in a face-to-face interview, they can see your body language, they can see if you're engaged and if you're motivated and excited about the role. In a video interview, this can be harder to bring across. Everything's sort of dumbed down because you're in 2D or 1D, in fact. So those are things to really think about: the language that you use and your use of hands and your facial expressions as well. So they're really looking to see that you're a good fit for their organization. So how do we prepare? Firstly, we want to prepare your technology and your environment. So it's crucial that you check your technology is working well. Check your camera, check your microphone. Can you be seen and heard clearly? Check your broadband. If you're having problems with your broadband, what is your backup solution? Can you use your mobile data? Can you use your phone as a hotspot and tether it? What other options do you have? Have you got a dongle you can use as an internet source? Always have some sort of backup in mind in case things go wrong on the day, which they invariably can do. And employers will be understanding of these things. So try not to panic. If things do go wrong, just keep up that communication with the employer. If you can email them, if things have gone wrong on the day, drop them an email and suggest that you can do it another time, the interview. Tell them your availability, offer some way of finding a solution. Also, as I said before, making sure you have the right software. You'll probably be sent lots of instructions from the employer. They may give you a test link so you can test the technology, you can see how it works, and you can have a little practice run before you do the real interview. This is a really useful tool to make the most of, because it will give you the chance to practice and make mistakes and watch yourself back. You may be able to record yourself and watch yourself back and see how you perform and how you come across on camera. So do make the most of any opportunity you have to practice using the instructions from the employer. Be aware that you might have to download software. Make sure you've done that in advance, obviously. And make sure your background and your lighting is suitable. So my background's really cluttered because I've got loads of flowers. It was recently my birthday, so it's not a very suitable background for an interview. I would have it a lot cleaner, crisper, so the recruiter's eyes are not going to be diverted to what's happening in your background, but only centering their attention on you. You can sometimes change your background to something more suitable. You can use filters and things. And think about your lighting as well. Best not to have a light shining from behind your face because it will put your face into a silhouette. Best to have a light coming in front of you, or maybe from behind your laptop, if you've got a lamp that you can use or something like that. Very often I see students whose cameras, this is all I can see of their face. Their cameras are not in a suitable position because I can't see the whole of their face. What you're looking for is this top half of you, so the employer can get a really good rounded view of your facial expressions and also how you use your hands as well. So really do think about where you're sitting, your background and the lighting. Also, you want to think about not having any distractions. So if you're in a shared household or if you're in a family household, let people know that you have an interview coming up and when exactly it is. Put a sign on the door asking for no disturbances. Make people aware, because the last thing you want is to be distracted by someone walking into the room when you're in the middle of an interview. That might be a person, it could be a child, it could be a pet, whatever it might be. You want to minimize as much as possible the risk of those distractions and allow yourself that time and space to really focus and give it your best. So all this sort of planning and preparation is worth it to avoid things happening at the time when you least want them to happen. So definitely worth planning ahead your environment, where it's happening, your technology, and letting people know around you that you have an interview coming up. All right, and then we're thinking about preparing yourself, dressing professionally, okay, from top to tail, because who knows what might happen in an interview. If you have to get up suddenly to get a drink of water and the employer can see you on the other side of the screen, you want to be sure that you're professionally dressed from head to toe, not just your head and shoulders, I would suggest. Even though you might have been doing Zoom calls with a nice top on, but your jogging bottoms or your pajama bottoms at the moment, for an interview, to help give yourself that psychological sense of being professional and delivering a really good presentation. Dress professionally, dress as though you're trying to impress the employer and you're in a good position and you're prepared for a business environment. So dress how you would if you were going to work for them. Okay, make sure you're familiar with your application. This might sound obvious, but many people might have forgotten what they wrote in their covering letter or their application form. So it's crucial that you read over those documents before your interview and you think about, what are my highlights? What are my relevant skills and experience related to this job? Because it's going to give you some indication of what they're going to ask you about in the interview. So practice again. I'm going to tell you how you can practice doing video interviews a bit later on. Make sure you're comfortable with your webcam. Make sure you're not leaning too far into it or away from it. Make sure you're talking to the camera rather than reading notes that you might have on your desk or around your screen. You don't want it to look like you're reading from a script. Get familiar with the platform, as we've said. Try and use words that demonstrate your passion and your motivation and your excitement for the role. They want to see that you want to work for them and that you're excited about this opportunity. And you might have to think about the language that you use to convey that motivation, because they may not be able to see it in your body language on a computer screen. So really think about the words that you use. Don't be afraid to say that I'm really driven, I'm really excited by this role, I'm enthusiastic, I'm looking forward to it. And don't forget to smile and show your approachable personality. They basically are hiring people, so they want to know that you're going to get on with their people and their teams. It's as simple as that. If you get nervous, which is you know almost guaranteed, you're going to get nervous, have a glass of water by the side of you. If it's a live interview, you can always pause and say, can I take, I just need to think about that, or I'm just going to take a drink of water, or use it as a way of buying some time. Think about your breathing. In between questions, if they're automated questions, do a bit of breathing practice, deep breaths in through your nose, out through your mouth. Calm your heart rate down. Try not to fidget. Some people have habits like playing with their hair, or biting their nails or picking their nails or something like that. Try and remain calm and look confident, and try and enjoy it. Pretend that you already work there, and that you're part of the team, and it's just a sort of conversation. They're just asking you questions about you. They want to find out more about you. And by thinking about that, you can kind of just enjoy telling people your story, and it might help you feel a bit more relaxed, and have a really good performance. Do switch off your phones, or put your phone somewhere where it's not visible, okay? Because it's really easy. I mean, I've got my phone here today because I'm looking at the time, but it's very easy to be distracted by pings and messages and alerts that are coming in. And that's the last thing you want when you're trying to focus on answering challenging questions in interview. So put your phone away, as well as any other distractions as well. Because employers will soon pick up if you have something in front of you that you're constantly glancing at throughout the interview. All right, any questions so far? Does anyone have any tips on how you might relax during the interview process? Has anyone had an interview so far, perhaps? No? Okay. Right. So the interview itself, whether it be a live interview or a recorded one with automated questions coming up, will contain a variety of types of questions. Some of those will be competency-based. They're testing your skills, such as teamwork and communication and data analysis and problem solving. Some of those will be strength-based questions. Now, strength-based questions are really looking at what comes naturally to you and what you enjoy, what skills you enjoy using, and what motivates you, okay? And they're a bit harder to prepare for, because they're just looking at, at your personality really, and whether the job would be suited to you. Because as you can imagine, we're all different, and we all play to different strengths, and we all enjoy using different strengths. So someone, my friend might be highly organized and loves being efficient and having everything well planned and prepared, whereas I'm a bit more creative. I'm a bit more, not scatty, but I've got notes everywhere, and I tend to do things in a bit more haphazard fashion. But my other strengths might be creative problem solving, for example, where I don't like to be so rigid in my planning and my problem solving techniques. So think about what your strengths are, what comes naturally to you. And the employer is looking for this because not all jobs are suited to all people, as you can imagine. People are suited to different environments and suited to using different skill sets. So very often, if you're not offered the job, sometimes it's just because it wasn't right for you. And this can sometimes be a really beneficial thing to take on board and reflect on going forward when you're applying for different jobs. And some questions will be technical, all right? So for some of these things, you can prepare possible answers to questions, and you can have your examples written on some brief notes around you when you do the interview, if you want to. But again, we don't want you to look distracted. I'm going to talk a bit more about questions a bit later on in the session. Make sure your answers and your language show your enthusiasm and your interest in the role, and practice. Do take the time to practice and practice and practice. And I'm going to tell you how to do that a bit later on as well. So things to remember: clothing, posture, being upright, relaxed, shoulders back, and appearing confident. Even if you don't feel it, act it. It's all a bit of a performance at the end of the day. Your camera positioning, so they can see your face and your shoulders okay. Eye contact, try and look at the camera. Again, do a practice run to see where your webcam is and what you're looking at and what the employer is going to see. Smile and don't be looking at notes that you're around you. Don't have a script stuck to the back wall which you're reading from, because they will instantly see if you're engaging and you're reading some text rather than engaging with the camera and talking to them. All right, so it can be tempting to have notes and to look at them, but when you're delivering your answer, always look at the camera. And your use of hands. I quite like the use of gesticulation, and it helps me emphasize points and things like that. Some use of hand and body language is really good, but you don't want to be doing it too much, so it distracts again from what you're telling them and what your answers are. So all these things you can only work out if you practice and you see a recording of yourself and you play it back. I'll tell you how to do that in just a second. So in a recorded video interview where you're not speaking to a person, but you're speaking to a screen, questions will appear one by one on a screen for a short amount of time, for about 1 or 2 minutes. And you'll often be given about 30 seconds, maybe more, to prepare your answer. And in that time, you can make notes. If I were you, I would perhaps write down the key points of that question and circle them. You must always keep in mind the question so that your answer is always relevant and it always comes back to the question, to answering the question. Very often students will hear a question or read a question and give an answer that they feel is appropriate, or that they feel is answering a question that wasn't actually being asked. So it's really important you always keep in mind what you've been asked and that your answer is relevant to that and tailored to that question. And that can be hard under pressure. So, if I were you, I'd write down keywords of the question. Don't write down the whole thing, but, keep in mind the keywords. Then you will start the recording, and you might have a varying length of time between 1 minute to 3 minutes to answer your question. And the timings can vary, okay? This is really crucial. So if you're given 1 minute to answer a question, you know that it's going to be quite a small, concise answer that they're looking for. If they're giving you 3 minutes to answer a question, you know that they are looking for more information and more detail. So always check the timings, the amount of time you're given to answer each question, because that's quite important. The more time you're given, the more detail is required from your answer. Don't worry if you don't fill the whole 3 minutes or whatever. Just keep in mind that you will need to give a more substantial answer. On average, you might be asked around 5 questions, and you will only have 1 attempt to answer those questions. In some software, you might get a chance to practice your answer, but in others you won't. You'll just have time to prepare your answer by making notes. So do be aware that you'll have 1 attempt only. But again, don't let that scare you or sort of trip you up for the entire length of the interview. If one question goes wrong and you think, oh my goodness, I could have answered that so much better, don't worry, forget about it and just focus on the next question. Put it behind you, show resilience and just move on. Okay. So during your answers, obviously remember, speak clearly, concisely, engage with the camera. Watch your pace of language as well. Don't answer too quickly, because while they're watching your answers, they'll want to be sort of digesting what you're telling them. And they need to understand what you're telling them too. So sometimes speaking at a slower pace can really help. Be aware that there's differences between in-person and virtual communication. So the ability to read body language is reduced, as we've spoken about already. If you decide to use notes, that's fine, but make sure they're not in view of the camera. And as I said before, don't make it look as though you're reading from a script, because it's very obvious and it won't be natural enough. And very often your script won't be answering the question that they've asked, because your script is just based on questions you've predicted will come up, but very often they'll be a bit different. And at the end, have some questions ready to ask the interviewers as well, particularly if it's a live interview. I mean, you wouldn't get it in a recorded interview, but if it's a live interview, they will undoubtedly ask, do you have any questions for us? And it's really crucial that you have something in mind to ask them, whether it be about your training and development, the sort of professional qualifications you'll be working towards, the support you'll be given perhaps, where you'll be working. Will you be working remotely or in person, in the office or on site? Think of some well thought out questions. Don't ask about salary and benefits and those sorts of things. That's pretty obvious, but don't ask those things in the interview situation. Okay, so top tips. First impressions really count. Speak clearly, smile, seem engaged. Practice recording your sample answers. Get used to sitting in front of a computer and watch the recording back. It can be really uncomfortable to begin with, but it's necessary and it's really worth it. Have notes in front of you, maybe just have lists of your key skills and experiences and some facts about the employer. Maybe just leave it as much as that so that you can glance at it in between questions you're being asked. Look at the webcam, ensure there's good lighting, check your backdrop, be clear, confident, pace your answers. Don't worry if something goes wrong. Just show some resilience and move on. Put it behind you and just focus on the next question. Any questions so far? The chat is very quiet. No? Okay. So this is the platform which you as Cardiff University students have free access to. It's called Shortlist Me, and it's really good. There's kind of like a marketplace of mock video interviews that you can choose from. So you can choose one that's more related to the type of role that you're being interviewed for. And it basically takes you through a series of questions, and it will record you and you can watch the recording back. You can browse different interviews, you complete your interview, you can do it on your phone as well, you can download the app. It's a really, really good way of analysing what you're like on camera, checking for your body language, your pace of answers, and your posture, and how you come across to people, to the viewers. So we would really, really recommend that you have a go at a couple of these interviews. There's several you can choose from, related to different schools and different roles. Well worth it. It's just a free practice test site, basically, and it'll give you some feedback at the end as well. So really, really worth looking at that. So other ways to prepare: anticipate the shortlisting criteria. So check the job advert, job description, person specifications, get an idea of what skills, qualities, experience, and attributes the employer will be looking for. And then you can start to think of ways that you can demonstrate those skills through your own experience. Research the company, develop that commercial awareness. Use not only their website, but their social media channels. Definitely LinkedIn, go and follow them on LinkedIn and read some of their news. Business and industry publications. Get an idea of what's happening on a more holistic scale in your industry. Be prepared to think and speak about current trends and challenges of the future and that sort of thing that are affecting your industry. Plan your day, tell people that you're having an interview, put the don't disturb sign on the door, switch off your mobile phone, and book a mock interview. So we, the careers team, offer mock interviews all week, every week of the year, and you can book them through your careers account. We do sort of mock interview Mondays, which are more general, or you can book one with your school-based careers advisor, and they will give you a tailored video interview, which will, if you send them the job description, which you certainly should, then they can prepare tailored questions that are relevant to that job role. Really, really useful, and they'll give you some really detailed feedback on your answers. You get a half-hour slot with a careers advisor, or use the shortlist me. In fact, you should probably do both. I would really recommend doing both in preparation. And also prepare in the same way as you would for a face-to-face interview. We've got lots of resources on your career journey on interview preparation. So just to take you through the last part of the session then, very quickly, possible questions that might come up. This is a really common one. Tell us about yourself, okay? Because it's tough. It's a tough one to answer succinctly, especially if you're being timed in a video interview. So what they're looking for here really is for you to tell them your current situation, the undergraduate or postgraduate degree you're on at the moment, maybe a bit about your key strengths and skills related to the role that the employer is looking for, maybe a bit about your highlights of your experience, and what you envisage yourself doing in the future, where you see yourself heading, you know, what are your career goals, somehow related, hopefully, to the job that you're going for. So that's definitely worth scripting a little bit and practicing and saying it out loud in front of a mirror or to a friend. Why have you applied for this role? Why do you want to work for us? So again, doing your research on the company is really crucial there. Tell us a time you've used good communication skills. Tell us a time you've worked as part of a team. Tell us a time you've managed your time or prioritized tasks. So these are all competency-based questions because they're testing your competencies and your skill sets. And we're going to talk about those in just a second, how to answer those sort of questions. What motivates you to get up in the mornings? What's been your most significant achievement? What are your strengths and weaknesses? So these are strength-based questions. And these are more things that are natural to you. And where do you see yourself in 5 years' time? So these strength-based questions are a bit more personal to you. But again, it's good to use examples and really think about what the employer is looking for. So maybe they're, I don't know if you're going for a sales role, it might be very target driven. So what might motivate you? Maybe there's something that's competitive that motivates you. Maybe it's about, getting through all my emails on time, or maybe it's about going for a run in the mornings, showing that you're driven, that you're motivated, that you're competitive in nature. So try and think of something that kind of relates to the role that you're applying for. Had a question in the chat. Can you still book a practice mock interview with Career Centre even if you've graduated? Yes, I think you can. You can book mock interviews for up to 2 years after you graduated. I think you have access to 1 or 2 mock interviews once you've graduated. Yes. So to do that, you have to register as an alumni, and you'll be sent an email from the university to register your personal email address, and then you can book a mock interview through the careers service. Yeah. Or if you know the email address of your careers advisor, just email them directly and they will get back to you and arrange something for you. Thanks for the question. Any other questions? Okay, so competency-based questions. Why do they ask these? Because if you've demonstrated a skill in the past, it means you can use it again when you're working for them in the future. They form a very common part of the recruitment process. They're things like examples down the bottom there. Give us an example when you used analytical skills. Tell us a time when you've worked as part of a team. Tell us a time when you've delivered excellent customer service. Tell us a time when you've persuaded someone of your opinion. So they're telling you that they want some evidence, okay? Tell us about a time. And for these types of questions, we always highly recommend that you use the STAR technique. You've probably heard of this before, but it's worth me reiterating. So STAR stands for situation, task, action, and result. So firstly, you're going to describe the situation. You set the scene. Maybe you were asked to give a time when you've worked as part of a team to deliver a successful outcome. So you describe the situation. So I was in a group work activity in university, or I was in a team sport and we were going for this major cup, or I was in a volunteering role and we had to organize an event of some sort. Set the scene, and then you talk about the task, what the goal was that you were working towards. Maybe you had to deliver a presentation as part of a project. Maybe you had some sort of charity fundraising target that you were working towards, for example. Then you describe your actions. Now, it's really crucial here that if you were working as part of a team, you describe your actions, what you did as a contributor to that team. Don't use the word we. They don't want to know what the rest of the team did. They want to know what you did and what was your impact and contribution. So maybe you volunteered as team leader, or maybe you were someone who had to go and do a load of research for the project. Maybe you were someone who had to piece it all together. What did you do? What was your part of the team, and what was your part of the action? And then you must describe the result. Lots of people forget this part, but it's really key because it finishes off the story. What was the outcome? Did you get a good result for your presentation? Did you present it to your peers and academics? Did you manage to raise all this money as fundraising? You know, what happened? Even if it was a negative result, perhaps it didn't go as planned, don't worry. Tell them about it. Tell them what you learned. What would you do differently next time? How could you change it into a positive? All right. And mainly in your answer, they're looking for this part, the action part, to have the most time devoted to it. Okay. So when you're giving your answer, spend most of the time describing your actions. So it's worth, if you know the skills that the employer is looking for, maybe on the job description, they're looking for teamwork, customer service, problem solving, or organization skills. It's worth reflecting from your own experience before the interview and thinking of excellent, really strong examples of when you've demonstrated those skills and practice using the STAR technique. That's how you can prepare really well for interviews. Think of your example and think about how you'd articulate the evidence. Okay, right. So lastly, just a few resources. We're almost on time, a little bit over. So we have a very good section on interview skills on Your Career Journey. Your Career Journey is our online careers platform. If you haven't been on there already, it's a fantastic resource. There's all sorts of stuff on there on preparing for interviews and psychometric tests as well, and CVs and cover letters. Have a look at that. Practice your video interview on Shortlist Me. It's also available on Your Career Journey in the Practice for Recruitment section. Book a mock interview with one of our advisors. I highly recommend this. It's a fantastic opportunity to be really grilled and get some excellent feedback. Don't worry if you're not prepared. It's a practice run. We don't expect you to be perfect. We expect you to be using it as a practice run and to get some feedback. So we have virtual mock interview Monday, which is a general mock interview, or book a more tailored one with your school through Careers account. And you can get a more tailored mock interview where you can upload the job description and your CV for us to create some questions. Here are some resources to the platforms you might be using, some tutorials for Teams, Microsoft Teams, and a tutorial page for Zoom. Okay, you can probably find other tutorials for other platforms online, well worth a look if you've got an interview coming up using one of those platforms. So we have loads of help and support and resources for you through the Careers Service. Your Career Journey has tips on CVs and application forms and some practice psychometric tests, which also form a really common part of the recruitment process and need to be practiced. So if you're applying for jobs now and you know that you'll be asked to complete some online psychometric tests, go and practice them weeks and weeks ahead of you making your applications, because they're tough, they're challenging, they're taken under timed conditions, and they require quite a bit of persistence and practice beforehand. Careers account, we've got our online CV checker. You can upload your CV and get instant feedback. You can book a one-to-one appointment with myself or one of the other advisors in the team, and when you can browse our jobs and events board. And then you've got Shortlist Me, which is our video interview software, which I spoke about earlier. Well worth looking at and having a go if you've got an interview coming up. Can I send the PowerPoint slides? Yeah, I'll tell you what, I've got your list of emails on Careers account, I think. So yes, I will send you all the group email with the PowerPoint slides this afternoon. So thank you so much for listening, everyone. I'm going to stop the recording there just so that we can ask some questions.